Hi everyone, welcome to another video of the Orchid Shelf. Today I wanted to feature in this video my lovely hybrid between Vanda denisoniana and Neofinetia falcata, which has been reclassified as a Vanda in itself. So basically it's just a cross between two Vandas. I like just calling it Neofinetia still though, because I believe that the growth habit, not the growth habit, the care requirements are a bit different from usual Vandas, and I believe this is why also it's been growing so well underneath my care, but also why so many people actually have been reporting such an ease of growth and ease of flowering when caring for a Neofinetia falcata type orchid. And that's why I wanted to make a video about this. The videos I've found online haven't been that long and as extensive in its explanation, so that's why I wanted to make one myself. Another reason is that this particular cross between the two Vanda species tends to have quite a high variation of what it looks like, how big it is, and what the flowers look like. So I thought I might just contribute another video to the world of YouTube. Sorry for my finger. All right, yeah, let's get into the flowers. Now you see that the flower stalk, as expected from a Vanda, grows from the from the in-betweens of the leaves, and it grows quite high, and then the buds actually develop this lovely and mysterious spur, and around this spur actually the flower petals and sepals open, and then you have this lovely flower that opens. So this one just opened today, which is why you see it's not even, the lip hasn't even folded up so that it looks more like it falls down. And what's really lovely about this hybrid is that the freshly opened flowers look a bit more like Neofinetia falcata flowers, because they're much more cream toned, they're much more whitish in color, and they look much more like porcelainy and much more fragile. Whereas just after 1 or 2 days, the typical flower shape of this hybrid will come out, which where the lip, for example, resembles a bit more the Vanda denisoniana, and the petals, they will actually bend backwards. If I don't know whether it's actually a temperature thing, so it has to be warm enough for that to happen, or whether it just generally happens, but with me it's actually quite extreme how much the flower petals just bend backwards. So it really looks like, to me it looks like some kind of I don't know, court official of ancient China or Korea. It has something very Asian about the flower, and I really love it because the flowers are just so beautiful, and they look very dynamic. The shape, as though the flower is just moving in the wind, and yeah, there's really a lot to say about the beauty of this flower, and I'm just really stunned by its beauty. I usually get around the same number of flowers, so we've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, this one has got around 6 flowers. But of course, these little offshoots of the mother plant, actually, they've already bloomed as well, so you can expect this plant to bloom quite early if you have it. But it bore like only 4 flowers or something, so it needs the fan needs to reach a certain size until it will produce more than 4 flowers for you. But that said, the flowering habit of this Vanda has been surprising me, and I would never have thought that one of the most vigorous growers in my orchid collection is actually a Vanda, because until now I've struggled quite a lot with Vandas, not because they don't grow well, but just because, you know, they just grow and grow and grow and grow, and they become really humongous, but they would flower rather rarely under my growth conditions, because I believe that the lights that I have are weaker than I think, and they're just nothing like sunlight. So that the flowering is actually not triggered enough. Whereas I have to say, with all Neofinetia crosses that I've had so far, they also flower under lower light. And the reason why I'm pretty sure about the Neofinetia parentage allowing for the plant to bloom under lower light as well is that in the past I had a Vanda denisoniana, and that Vanda was pretty sensitive to lower light levels. And if you didn't give it like sunlight every day during the evening hours or the morning hours, it would just not bloom. And this one hasn't always been like in the center of my grow lights, but sometimes it's like on the side where I need the space and it's a bit off. And, you know, I can tell you that the grow light actually just stops here. So this part of the shelf will not be as bright, but you know, it just very happily keeps on growing. And this is the 5th time I think it has been in bloom for me this year. So what happens usually is that it produces a flower stalk, and then it blooms like maybe for 2 or 3 weeks. Then the blooms fade, and I don't have to wait for that long until new blooms actually are produced, maybe 1 or 2 months. So it's been really, really surprising how well this plant has been blooming for me. Obviously, in this room, the temperatures stay quite warm. So even though it's got far into the autumn now, it's still between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius in this room. So 20, I believe 20 degrees Celsius are around 68 Fahrenheit, is that right? So above that even, because of the grow lights in the shelf. And I installed a light screen so that once the light screen is down to block off some light into the room, then it will get even warmer. But both Vanda denisoniana and Neofinetia falcata are known to be able to deal with lower temperatures as well, because Vanda denisoniana occurs in higher altitudes, so in mountains, for example, and Neofinetia falcata grows in parts of the world where it can get really, really bitter cold during winter. So, for example, the southern Korean peninsula and Japan. And this makes this orchid actually very, very flexible as a grower, because it can deal with very high humidity and very high temperatures. As in East Asia, it gets very, very hot during the summer. It can deal with very high light levels, but it can also deal with lower light levels, as I've experienced. So, for example, you see here that because these offshoots are further away from the grow lights, they develop darker leaves, whereas the higher you get in the orchid growth, the lighter the color becomes. And for me, that just means that the orchid is closer to the light and therefore develops a brighter leaf color. So it just enjoys all sorts of growing conditions. And the biggest difference, I have to say, between usual Vanda care and growth and Neofinetia growth is that you could keep this plant also just in sphagnum moss, and the sphagnum moss could also just stay moist all of the time, all year round, and the plant would actually even love it and just keep growing all the time, which cannot necessarily be said about all bigger Vandas or like Vandas of a different section, because they really need to dry out in between, otherwise, especially inside the pot, you know, more towards the center, the roots will just die off and it will create problems later down the line. So to show you what I mean by like constantly moist conditions, so you can see that a bit of water accumulated from my watering a week ago, which doesn't do any harm, is that you can see that the top of the pot has already got quite dry. You can see how grey the roots are, whereas the lower part, as expected, is still quite moist. And you can see how the roots here are quite moist still, so that the root is not grey yet, but still a bit green. And I recently actually repotted this plant into this pot. I had it in an orchid top pot before, where all the sides are open and it's just in plastic slats. The reason was that I've got some smaller Neofinetia falcatas outside on the balcony, and those ones just love staying wet or moist all the time in sphagnum moss, so it can really deal with much more moisture around the roots than other Vanda types, I believe. And in the orchid top, it was just drying out way too much, and orchid tops tend to stay surprisingly moist inside, whereas outside they get very dry. And that's a problem in my orchid care, because actually Neofinetias, in my experience, suffer much more than bigger Vanda types when the roots stay dry for longer than maybe 2-3 days, because then the growth of the root tips will slow down. And I believe it's because of the much higher moisture that I provide this orchid compared to my bigger Vandas, that in fact it shows such vigorous root tip growth, even though it's potted in a plastic pot which is closed to the sides. So this is really not what you would usually think from growing a Vanda indoors, because people say that this is way too moist, it's not airy enough, and the roots will actually die off, or even get mushy and get all just rot off. Not for this one, not for Neofinetia falcata type orchid in my experience. I keep it in a mixture of chunky bark, styrofoam chips, and large pieces of lava rock. And like this, it's actually been growing fantastically for me. You see that there are big air pockets in the substrate in the pot, and I just keep it that way on purpose. So don't worry if you pot, if you put the potting medium into the pot and you feel a bit like, oh God, the medium is not really reaching into all pockets. Actually, I find that this is probably very good for the plant, because it gives the plant a lot of airiness while actually the environment stays moist for longer. And inside the pot, I can't show it to you because I don't know whether you see it. Yeah, you see a bit in the background. Inside the pot, in the center, I actually put a net pot. So a mini net pot that you would actually use for Neofinetia falcatas a lot. I just turned it around, I put it into the middle of the pot so that the center of the pot stays free of a potting medium, and that's been really good for the plant. And as you see, the roots actually grow into the center as well, and I believe that it gives you a good ratio between airiness and moisture, so it doesn't get too moist, so that the roots actually rot off when they grow into the center, which tends to happen a lot with these big plastic pots. So yeah, I'm actually really happy about this plant, and that's why I fell in love with Neofinetia falcata crosses, because they tend to defy a lot of the growing conditions that are often touted online for this type of orchid. So it's perfect for indoor conditions. And if you want a comparison of its size, so you know, across, maybe I have a span of a maximum of like 28 centimeters, which is not even, I don't know, how much is that? 9 inches, 10 inches? So compared to other Vanda types, it stays very compact. It doesn't even get that high either. And the offshoots, actually, they grow very, very fast compared to other Vandas that I have, which is why you might also have multiple flower stalks at the same time. And you can also divide the plant if you want to, and just give it to someone that you love. So really, on many, many levels, it's been very pleasurable, and it's giving me so much happiness, this orchid. As a last point though, many people prize this orchid's fragrance, and that's unfortunately not something that I can say. You know, people describe the fragrance to be jasmine-y and stuff, which is actually one of my favorite fragrances. Like the Prosthechia radiata that I have produces exactly that fragrance that I love. But for my nose, I really don't like the fragrance of this Neofinetia at all. And I'm actually very happy that the plant that I possess doesn't produce a very strong fragrance, because some people actually say the fragrance of one plant can fill an entire room. And I'm really glad that it doesn't do that in my bedroom here. Because for me, it reminds me of these anti-moth, you know, these white anti-moth balls that people keep in their cupboards in a little bag, and it really smells horrible for me. So I try not to get too close to the flowers, so that I don't have to actually smell the fragrance. That was really unexpected, because so many people actually say how beautifully fragrant this flower is. But yeah, not really my thing, but look at the beauty of the flowers. Isn't it stunning? So beautiful. So it's totally worth to have. It's not as cheap as other Vandas or as other orchids. Actually, Vandas are not cheap, but as other orchids, let's say, because it's not a hybrid that you find that often. But if you do find it, please do get it, because it's so easy to keep, such a good grower, and it just flowers all the time. All right, happy orchid growing. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.